Welcome. My name is Tim Jones with Foreclosure.com. Today I'm joined by Noelle Randall, a successful entrepreneur, best-selling author, real estate coach, and mentor with more than 20 years of experience. I'm beyond excited to learn from her today as we dive into today's topic. Noelle, thank you for taking the time to be here.
Nice to be here, Tim. I love foreclosure.com, so this was amazing to be able to speak with you and share some great information on today's topic, which is definitely a topic I think people are going to be interested in.
I think so. Uh, why don't we dive in? One of the biggest challenges home buyers face today is affordability. In this episode, we'll discuss strategies and resources to help buyers find affordable homes. Before we dive in, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. So for buyers asking, how much house can I afford? What key factors should they consider?
So it's so funny because most people go into that and think, oh, I need to just go get pre-qualified. But before you even go to a mortgage lender, you already kind of know how much money you make and you already know some of what your debts are. So before you even kind of like get into the idea of, I am going to buy a house and I'm just going to run to a mortgage company and just go ahead and get, pre-qualified. It's actually pretty good if you yourself look at how much you make. You know what I mean? You can look at your own pay stubs. You can look at your own W-2s, and you can also know what your expenses are and start to think about what that is. And so for people that are in the mid range and making maybe $50,000 per year, for example, well, then that's great. You're going to break that down and divide that by 12 and say, okay, well, if I'm making $50,000 per year, that's $4,200 a month or whatever. Again, I'm doing this off the top of my head.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to look at my bills and say, okay, well, I have a car note, that's $300. I have, a student loan, that's $400. And, kind of your just solid bills that you already have without necessarily talking about the utilities and some other things. Because um, one of the things that I have learned over the time is I actually used to be a mortgage underwriter in my old life. Obviously now I'm a real estate entrepreneur, multimillionaire in real estate. So I've left corporate America behind, but in my former life, I literally was a FHA underwriter and then became a manager. So I still have that FHA certification, and FHA loans are probably a really great starting place for people, but the great thing about them is they allow for you to have like a higher debt to income ratio. So a lot of times, if you just go to a website, they may tell you that you can't get as much home as you can. But if you go to you kind of know your income and then you take it to a mortgage lender, they may actually be able to get you qualified for more homes. So instead of you thinking I can get a $200,000 house, you may be able to get 250 or 300 with an FHA loan. So don't necessarily just bog yourself in and think that, oh, I don't make enough money, I can't buy a house, the houses in my area cost too much. There are so many ways to get into a home and so many loan programs where they're really trying to help, people get into homes. So that's
That's
one of the
great.
things I always say.
Yeah, no, that's great information. Got to think outside the box sometimes. Um,
Yeah.
so once buyers determine their budget, how can they start searching for affordable homes, including distressed assets like foreclosures and pre-foreclosures?
Now, this is the part that I love. Okay. So, most home buyers, like I said, Noelle Randall used to be broke, bankrupt, and living in her parents' basement and actually went through foreclosure. Okay. So, I have some like real life experience with this.
Yeah.
And then, exactly 3 years after my foreclosure, I was back in another home.
Wow.
Okay. So, when I'm talking about like, how do you decide what your budget is? Well, guess what? Foreclosures and pre foreclosures actually are going to be an amazing way to buy homes. But again, when I was going through foreclosure, I did not know that. I literally bought the home the regular way, with a real estate agent, paying full price,
Mhm.
got that home got foreclosed on. I got a hard lesson. Now I come back into the market a little bit smarter, more like an investor. I had taken some classes and some seminars and I learned about, pre foreclosures and short sales and all of this fun stuff that you can actually find somebody else that's in distress, and that can be a really good deal for you. And now instead of you coming into a home where, you're buying a brand new construction home, for example, with no equity in it, you're paying full price for it. Well, if you find somebody else that's losing their home, then you might be able to pick up a home where you get 20, 30% worth of equity in it. You may be able to find a home in a great neighborhood, and all you have to do is maybe paint or, fix the floors and a couple of little things. And now you're in a much stronger financial position. And like I said, I learned this the hard way. I literally went through foreclosure, sheriff coming, taking all my stuff out, embarrassing, moved back in my parents, then going to classes, then learning. hey, you should start buying homes more like an investor.
Yeah.
You should be looking not just for terms, but seeing that you could find someone else's distress, and that could be a real win for you. So once you have these budgets, don't just think, oh, they pre-qualified me for $200,000. Let me go to these new construction homes and buy this brand new thing because they have the stainless steel and they have the granite countertop. Let's talk about that for a second. You can find a great home with some of these same features that you're looking for on sites like foreclosure.com, and not just homes that have already been in foreclosure, but homes that are in default, pre-foreclosure, for example.
No, that's very very good information, and there's no experience like the experience you're going through. You have to go through, right? No, you can't learn a lesson until you actually feel it. So that I'm
Yeah,
sure that
yeah,
experience was challenging.
yeah.
I'm glad you learned all those lessons from it.
Yeah, they say no losses, just lessons.
That's right. That's right. You got to look at the silver lining and everything, huh?
Yeah, yeah. And I could say honestly, it was probably the best thing in the world. Because imagine if that never happened. How
Mm,
would I have ever been introduced to distressed properties and being able to sometimes even help now, in the situation I've been in where I've been able to make lots of money in real estate, being able to help someone that's losing their home. And
yeah.
instead of them actually going all the way through the foreclosure and that ending up on their credit report with 10 years on your credit report, it doesn't come off, it's in public records, and those major hits to your credit score, and these long waiting periods before you can buy another home. Well, what if you were able to buy the home before it goes through the full foreclosure proceeding, meaning the bank actually took the home back, and you buy it from them when it's in default or past due, but you didn't let them go all the way to the foreclosure. You as the buyer picked up a great property and got some equity in it, probably got it at a discount because obviously they're in distress. So that's how you get discounted property. That's how real estate investors, that's how we think.
Hmm.
And then at the same time, you help that homeowner. They're losing their home. They were
Yeah.
about to go into foreclosure and be all embarrassed and have these terrible situations. And now you were able to purchase that property from under them. So it's such a win-win
Hmm.
with distressed properties that I don't think the average buyer of a home is thinking about. I don't know why, but no one teaches us this. And we just think, oh, I have to pay top dollar for a home. I have to only go to, with a realtor and go into MLS or go to Zillow.com. And I have to find these retail properties and pay retail price when there's ways to buy homes as an investor and still live in the home.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
great points. Great points. Um, so at what point should a buyer consider a short sale?
Yeah. So again, I wish I would have thought about that. But again, I actually lost my home during the two, you know what I'm saying this. It was 2008, 2007. So no one could get real financing. It was like really, we say it was a housing bubble, but really it was a financial crisis. It was
Yeah.
the fact that you couldn't get a mortgage is really what caused that whole recession. So the short sale, meaning you call the lender up and you basically owe more. So say, for example, you're in that market crash. Let's go back to 2007, 2008, when Noelle lost everything, okay? And I have this house that I owe $300,000 on, and everybody's offering me 250.
Yeah.
So I could have basically called the bank and say, hey, will you take 250 and do a short sale, take less. And that does help with the credit. Honestly, it was a bad time, and it just, quite frankly, everybody were doing robo, foreclosures, and I guess banks at the time thought let's just do foreclosures and realize how silly that was. We looking back, they
Yeah.
really should have done more short sales and offered more short sales, but during that time, I'm being honest with you, they were not with it, not my mortgage company anyway.
Yeah.
But it is a really great solution now. And I noticed a lot of consumers taking advantage of the short sale. So when you realize that you are getting behind, you don't have, more importantly, you don't have an income. I think that's really probably the bigger thing that stops people from,
Mhm.
being able to pay their mortgage is not necessarily not having any money, cash in the bank or whatever, but they don't have any income coming in. So you lose your job, for example. You don't have any money. So you're not going to be able to pay this mortgage. That's when you got to start immediately looking at, okay, wait a minute. How much is this house worth and how much do I owe? and having those conversations with your lender, because they may tell you, yeah, we're willing to do a short sale. You know, as soon as you get 1 month past due, they may be willing to do it, or 2 months past due. Another thing that we're not talking about just yet, but it could even be a deed in lieu of foreclosure, you know, so that you're not just letting the whole, like I said, not letting the sheriff come to your house and pull all your stuff out. And, you know, it's embarrassing to the neighbor. You actually just work with the lender to say, hey, I can't pay this anymore. I lost my job. I lost my income. I'm sick, whatever, you know, cancer, you know, a lot of these situations, real life situations happen. So I really think that people should start looking at the short sale as soon as you realize your income isn't going to be able to. I don't think you should wait until you're 30 and 60, but you definitely, once you're 30 days past due on your mortgage, you should definitely start looking at, okay, wait a minute, how much could I sell this home for, and how much do I owe on it?
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And it's got to be difficult if you're going through that process. You know, I'm sure you feel kind of helpless and not knowing what to do. So a real estate investor that can come in, provide a solution like that, that seems like a win-win, even for the mortgage company that essentially could have a bigger loss if they, you know, keep it on the book. So no, that's very
Yeah,
helpful.
yeah,
So as far as like, uh, can we discuss some home buyer assistant programs, you know, options that are available at the city, county, state, even national
yeah.
levels?
Yeah. Yeah. And so many people really don't take advantage of them. So if you're like a first time home buyer, and so many people, what's really sad is we're actually, I just saw this stat the other day, cannot afford a home. They feel like I can't afford it. And then when you actually look at what they make versus their debts, they are
Mhm.
not able to afford it, or they don't have enough money saved for the down payment. Now, that's kind of weird to me, because most of the programs I'm talking about, you really just need 3%, 3.5%. But guess what? If you get one of these down payment assistance programs, they may be able to provide you that. And I don't think that most people even dare, they don't even know this stuff exists. And there are so many home buyer programs, down payment assistance programs, where they will literally give you the entire down payment. Now, yes, there's some caveats. Okay, you have to live in the home. Okay, obviously they have a goal that they're trying to do. It's economic development is
Mhm.
usually to make sure people are living there, because obviously there's a multiplier effect. When you buy a home, you you know, have a landscaper, you call Home Depot, you put appliances, utilities. Like, there's just so many economic multiplier effects to home ownership, which is why it is so important to our economy. So when you do these things, there's, or you say, I want to buy a home, there are all these groups, nonprofits, government, cities, as you're saying, willing to give you that 3% or $10,000, 5,000 that you can use for the down payment, so you do not have to save all of the money that you need for the down payment. I just think the issue is they're not advertised. You know, you're not watching the Super Bowl and they're like, hey, we have money for you for your home. You know, that's just not
Yeah.
how it works. It may be a Chase commercial or Bank of America, but they surely aren't saying, hey, we got all the money for you, but it exists. And
Mhm.
so the smart person watching this video, now you know something that 95% of the population, I don't think even knows. And those are amazing, using those down payment assistance programs. And like I said, in most cases, all it requires is for you to say you're going to live in the house and you to live in it, and for you to stay there a certain amount of time, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is.
No, yeah, that's very helpful. And it's surprising how little information, or it's kind of challenging to find that information too, you know, when you're
It
going
is.
searching and
It
for.
really is. And a lot of, and like I said, so let me be clear. Like I said, I went through foreclosure and all this other stuff, but I'm also a licensed broker in the state of Florida. And I've actually had my real estate license since 2006. Okay. I started in Georgia, Texas, Virginia. Now I'm in Florida. And I know for a fact that is not something they teach. In fact, as a real estate agent, real estate broker, we have to do continuing education. And that's like an election. You know what I mean? You know, when you go to college, you have your core classes and you get to choose some classes. So only the real estate agents that chose to learn about that know about it. So you may be dealing with an agent who has no idea about down payment assistance programs. So it's really, really important that we get this information out there, get that information out there. Real estate is a real indicator of you getting wealth. You know, 89% of all millionaires have been created so through real estate. And home ownership is a real indicator of your wealth. You know what I mean? And not just saying, oh, well, you know, you gotta pay for where you live. So I don't want to hear this foolishness about, I'll just rent. Well, then somebody owns that apartment you're living in, or that house you're living in. Why not let it be you and get all the deductions and the benefits of home ownership? And at the same time, now let's add it up. You can even get free money that you don't have to repay for the down payment.
Yeah. It sounds like a no-brainer to me.
Sounds like a no-brainer to me. I mean, unless they make some app that we can live in, or there's some new technology. Maybe we can live in a laptop. As far as I know, we're going to need places to live as human beings. So I am a firm believer you should buy a house. I am not one that says, hey, rent all your life, because at
Yeah.
that point you realize the person you're renting from owns it.
Yeah. No, and that equity buildup and all the value, and as you mentioned, the depreciation that you can write off and things like that. There's so much value with that. So no, that's great. So for these down payment assistance programs, housing assistance loans, how do they help for out-of-pocket costs for the buyers?
Yeah, so most of them that I have experience with, they go directly towards the down payment. Now, obviously, like you said, there are some ones that are kind of like loans where you can use towards the closing costs, help pay for your appraisal and
Hmm.
inspection if you need it, and things like that. But the ones that I'm really familiar with and that I push on usually have to do with just straight money for the down payment. You know what I mean? I need 3% down. They are going to give me two of it, 2% of it. I only have to come up with 1%, things like that. And to me, those are actually very wide and available. But again, it's the caveat of finding them, or working with a real estate agent that gives you that list, or even resources like that to give you a list of those. But in most cases, it really is not this difficult process. It's nowhere near. It's not even like filing your taxes or anything. Most of the time, it's filling out a form, showing your income, and then being in a certain geographical area. You know what I mean? Like they want, because obviously they're pushing home ownership in their city or their county, which is where most of the monies come for, or the grants too. It's for a certain geographical area. So it really usually does not have a lot of hoops to jump through. But you may have to take a class, for example, on home ownership. Yeah,
Hmm.
so little hoops. I don't think they're really high bars to jump through.
Yeah. It's probably worth the time to
It is
get the
usually worth the
resources.
time, for free money.
Well, just so everyone is aware, foreclosure.com has compiled a list of national, state, local programs, including HUD, USDA, Freddie Mac Homebuyer Assistance, VA Housing Assistance. And, as you mentioned earlier, you got to check out the local programs offered by cities and counties. I know each program has different qualifications and eligibility requirements, so we recommend researching all available options in your area to see which ones you qualify for. So, um, Noelle, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. Is there anything else you want to mention to the audience before we get out of here?
Yeah, so as an absolute, I think foreclosure.com. Like I said, I love that you guys have those resources. That is an amazing thing I think people should take advantage of. But I really want people to start buying homes that are in foreclosure, or that are behind or in distress, because I really think that so many people buy homes with the wrong mentality. They're buying homes like a civilian. Even when we started off, what's my budget? So it's like walking to the car dealership. They say, how much monthly payment do you want to pay?
Yeah.
And now you're on the wrong track, because now
Mhm.
you don't know the price of the car. So instead of going into home ownership and saying, okay, I can afford a $200,000 house or whatever, well, great. Instead of going with that normal mindset that they're trying to push you into, you can actually take that money and take it a lot further with distressed properties, because in many cases you're buying it for 200,000, but it might be worth 300,000. And then that is a true way that you want to start buying homes and real estate, instead of buying homes with no equity in them.
It's terrific information. And for any of our audience that wants to get more information from you, how can they follow you?
Yeah, so one of my biggest things is my YouTube channel. Noelle Randall is just my name, Noelle Randall, Randall. We just hit over 900,000 subscribers, so super
Wow.
excited. I've been putting out free content for 5 years, on a very, very consistent basis, and just want to make sure that I'm giving people all these tools and resources. Like I said, I went through it. I was in foreclosure. I lost all of it started going to classes and seminars and learning the same way whoever's watching, you watching this video. I started learning and saying, I'm going to learn this. And today I'm a multimillionaire in real estate. I have dozens of properties. I was able to pick myself up. And so I really feel like real estate is a great way to build wealth. And I think that most of us just don't know how easy it can be. We think that it's more difficult than it is, but resources like foreclosure.com, resources like down payment assistance programs, resources like FHA loans, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Can really get you on the path of home ownership and then on to being an investor and owning multiple properties.
That's great. Well, that's all the time we have for today. If you found this video valuable, please like and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to sign up for our free email alerts. Until next time, I'm Tim Jones with foreclosure.com. Thank you for joining us today.